Bloodborne is a masterpiece. I know that word is thrown around left, right, and center when it comes to art, but I think that this game truly embodies the word masterpiece. From the quick and exciting gameplay to the dark and depressive atmosphere, every bit of this game is damn near perfect. From Software prior to this have made some incredible games, such as Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and 2, and it was hard to see them top it, but they went and created the greatest game of all time. If you know me, you'll know that the Souls games are some of my favourite games ever. I've only ever played Dark Souls 1 and 2, but the experiences I've had with these games are incomparable to any other game I've played. However, I do admit that they are certainly flawed. Dark Souls has some genuinely perfect moments from the start to Ornstein and Smough and the DLC, but after Anor Londo the game does fall off quite a bit, with the Lost Izalith and the Duke's Archives. Dark Souls 2 nearly reaches the peaks of the first game with the DLCs, but ultimately falls short with the janky gameplay and weak bosses. However, Bloodborne, I believe, consistently stays brilliant throughout the whole game, even exceeding some of the moments in the previous games. And just a heads up, in this footage that you're about to see, I may be using a weapon that not a lot of people like, and some think are overpowered, and I agree, but I only used it to get this video. I also won't be talking about the Chalice dungeons because they're completely separate from the game and areas that I quite frankly don't like. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Dark Souls and Demon Souls laid out the blueprint of combat for what was to come for the From Software games. The slow system of fighting made every swing feel more methodical, and you had to pick and choose where to go in and when to stand back. This made for a slower and more passive style of game. This slowness was only amplified by the strength of shields and how overpowered they can be when you hide behind them. This was one of the few problems I had with Dark Souls, as it can make otherwise difficult bosses kind of a joke. Dark Souls 2 certainly speeds up the gameplay, but it feels a lot more awkward. Shields are a lot less of a viable option in terms of strategy, as getting hit with the shield up causes a lot of endurance as well as chunk of health. Bloodborne completely changed the combat mechanics. The quick and exciting gameplay is a very stark difference from the Souls games. Shields are practically non-existent in this game, and the only base game shield available is put in as a joke. Shields are replaced with guns in this game and can be incredibly useful if used correctly. This also makes for a more varied and exciting style of play, as it is much less defensive than the Souls series. Dodging in Souls games has always been a viable option for those looking for the challenge, and with Bloodborne it's a requirement. As I mentioned before, shields are made out to practically be a joke in this game, and with this comes a playstyle that's incredibly aggressive, and thus comes the change in dodging. You're now able to choose whether you want to roll or sidestep when dodging, and it makes the game much more exciting. While it's a small change, it greatly improves the combat. Another incredibly vital part of Bloodborne's combat are the weapons. There are far fewer weapons in Bloodborne compared to Dark Souls, and it completely works in its favour. And the best part about it is that almost all available weapons could be used in the endgame. In fact, on my first playthrough, I picked the Sword Cleaver and stuck with it until the end of the game. The most innovative aspect of Bloodborne's weapons are the fact that they can transform. With a simple click of L1, your weapon becomes a trick weapon. A weapon that can deal more damage but is slower and more deliberate. Ludwig's Holy Blade is probably the best transformation in the whole game, as its damage output is insane. The strong R2 attack almost destroys every enemy that comes its way, and the L2 attack deals an incredible amount of damage. My favourite thing about these transformations is that you're able to transform during the attack, which again makes for an incredibly fun and dynamic playstyle. The healing in this game just about made my favourite in the From Software catalogue, although there are still some flaws. But for positives, it's finally fast, and you're able to move while you're healed. Games like Dark Souls 1 and 2 brought you to a dead stop when you heal, and while this can make it so that you have to strategically heal, it can also become annoying, especially with Dark Souls 2 where it gradually heals. However, Bloodborne's blood vials make the game quicker and more exciting. The one flaw I have with it is that it doesn't regenerate the same amount of vials. A player can hold up to 20 blood vials, however you have to either collect them from enemies or spend echoes in the Hunter's Dream. And if you get stuck on a boss or an area, it's very likely that you'll have to farm them. However, I think this criticism can only be made for first playthroughs of the game, because on subsequent ones you'll know that you can spend echoes on them after leveling up as much as you can. Stamina in much of the Souls series was mostly used as a means of strategy. Because of the Souls game's slow combat, attacks would use a lot of stamina, meaning that you'd have to attack less because you're thinking of your shield or dodging. However, with Bloodborne, less stamina is used through attacks and dodging, meaning that you can do a lot more with what you have. More attacking and dodging makes the combat feel a lot more free and, as I've said a lot this video, exciting. Carol runes in this game are one of my favourite aspects of it. These runes act as rings from Dark Souls, allowing you to become more powerful through the usage of them. Being able to increase your max blood vials, stamina, health is something that most Souls games have, but for some reason having it be through runes makes it feel a lot cooler. And for my furry viewers, you can turn yourself into a furry. Bloodborne's gameplay and mechanics are probably my favourite in any game I've ever played. It forces you to be the aggressor in most fights, making the game exciting to play. If there's any one thing that's consistent with every From Software game, it's the beautiful and captivating landscapes and areas, and Bloodborne might just top them all. Right from the get-go, Central Yharnam is a hauntingly beautiful area that invokes both fear and intrigue in the player. Just climbing up this ladder shows how beautiful this game is. The smoke-filled orange sky mixed with the screech of the cleric beast perfectly sets up this game to be as unnerving and stunning as any game you've ever played. And speaking of Central Yharnam, this is probably the best introduction area to any game ever. Every Bloodborne player remembers the first time going through here and being stuck at the campfire for hours. I mean, even playing this game multiple times, I still get a little hesitant to face it. What makes this area probably the best in the game is just how much there is to explore. From Software has always made maze-like areas such as the Painted World of Ariamis or the Gutter, but Central Yharnam is another beast. Every nook and cranny contains some wondrous items or NPC storylines, and some of these storylines can bring you to tears. Another incredibly haunting area is Yahar'gul, the Unseen Village. I'll go into Rom later in the video, but after defeating him, you're teleported to this village, and it's honestly one of my favourite looking areas in the game. It's nightmarish, and it is as hard as any other area in the game. From the red blood moon to the amygdalas hanging from the buildings, Yahar'gul is a nightmarish place. While a lot of areas deliver more of the same beauty like Old Yharnam and Cathedral Ward, the game's design really shines through in areas that break from this. Areas like Canehurst Castle and the Forbidden Woods make for some of the best and most challenging moments in the game. Castle Canehurst is an optional area similar to the Painted World of Ariamis from Dark Souls 1, except this area has an even better climax. From the moment the gate is lifted, you're welcomed into this dark and snowy area, that of a fallen kingdom full of despair. When you head inside the castle, you find that this area is one of the more unique and interesting in the game, with its maze-like wonder once again drawing you in, and honestly pulling this switch and opening up the bookshelf is one of my favourite aha moments in the game. After this, you unlock a shortcut, head up the ladder, traverse some rooftops and face Martyr Ligarius. More about him later. Even though the Forbidden Woods is one of, if not the largest areas in the game, it mostly keeps up with the constant threat of attack. While this place gets a lot of stick for being frustrating, and trust me, I get it, the dreary look of this area and the feeling that you're constantly facing threats makes for quite an exhilarating experience. One thing I've always loved about Dark Souls is the interconnectedness of the world. The way almost every path can lead you to Firelink Shrine is probably the most impressive thing about Dark Souls, technically speaking. Bloodborne continues this world building, but in a much more obvious way. Like, oh, there's a door there, that'll be a shortcut. There are obviously some exceptions to this, but for the most part it's very on the nose. Nevertheless, the shortcuts are still extremely impressive. The areas in this game have such a distinct beauty that no other game can really replicate. The dark and dreary atmosphere this game constantly fills you with is perfect for the type of game this is. The enemies in Bloodborne are probably the weakest aspect of the game. While some enemies can truly be haunting, a lot of them are reused a lot. And while the Huntsmans are really good starter game enemies, they really don't need to be reused in the Forbidden Woods, Yahar'gul and the Cathedral Ward. Another problem are the hunter enemies. Don't get me wrong, they can be a fun fight, but most of them are incredibly unbalanced. They mostly have unlimited stamina and bullets, which makes for an incredibly frustrating fight. And don't even get me started on the 3 hunter gangbang in Yahar'gul. It's almost impossible to take them out all at once, so you have to die repeatedly just to take one out. I normally opt to just sprint through, open up the shortcut and bold hunter mark out. The only redeeming quality is that they don't respawn. But don't get me wrong though, some of the enemies are incredible. Facing off against the executioners and the snatchers is always an incredibly fun and intense fight that I enjoy a lot. The snatchers' slow but powerful attacks make for a calculated fight, and the executioners' unpredictable movements make the fights all the more exciting. In Dark Souls 2, one of the major problems I had with it was the amount of enemies there can be in a single place, and the slow, janky combat system makes this just simply frustrating. However, with Bloodborne, there are probably more enemies, and it makes the game exhilarating. Places like Yahar'gul and Forbidden Woods are riddled with enemies: huntsmen, dogs, snakes, big snakes, and snake people. The Forbidden Woods is absolutely one of the hardest and most packed areas in the game. However, because of the quick and exciting gameplay, the density makes it a fun challenge rather than an annoying obstacle. While enemies in Bloodborne aren't as varied as the other Souls games, they are certainly still nightmarish and can send chills up anyone's spine. The bosses in any Souls game is something that I look forward to the most. They can make for the most memorable moments in a game and can perfectly climax an area. Bosses can be big, small, fast or slow, but if it evokes that feeling of accomplishment, then they've done their job. And for the most part, Bloodborne's bosses accomplish this. Barring maybe Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne has the best bosses in the Soulsborne series. While the past few games have had a few dud bosses, some more than others, Bloodborne manages to make almost every boss in the game feel exciting. However, while there are some incredible bosses in the game, I wanted to go over the duds first, just to end the segment on a good note. The Witches of Henwick is widely agreed to be the worst boss in the game, and although yes, it is an easy fight, I think that the monster summons make it a bit more interesting. But these guys can only be summoned if you have insight, and without it, it's really, really easy. Mikolash is a boss who I really think probably shouldn't be a boss. The hardest part about the fight is running through the maze-like boss arena to get into the actual fight. And even if you get into the fight, it's super underwhelming with only one attack that can do actual damage, and that attack is easily avoidable. While the second phase fight adds another attack, it's one that can be easily avoided through dodges or by stun knocking him. The thing that truly carries the fight is the fact that the Nightmare of Mensis is one of the best areas in the game. And the Celestial Emissary. I think it's best we leave this 40-second fight alone. Those two are probably the only bosses in the game that you could really call bad. The next one I'll talk about is one that I would call underwhelming. Now with an intro like that, you'd expect an epic fight, but unfortunately its appearance is far more impressive than the battle. Don't get me wrong, it can still be fun, but you can mostly just resort to hitting the body repeatedly and you'll probably win. It's similar to the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls in that the fight is hugely carried by how cool the boss looks. The good bosses in this game can be separated into two groups, beasts and humanoids. I'll talk about 3 bosses from each of the categories. The first humanoid boss we run into is Father Gascoigne, and is honestly one of the hardest bosses in the game for newcomers. Its fast and hard to navigate movements make it difficult to pin down when you should attack. And with most humanoid bosses, Papa Guac's weakness is parrying. And if there's anyone new to the game watching, please learn how to parry. It's absolutely one of the most important functions in the game. Humanoid bosses can come in all shapes and sizes, and apparently numbers. The Shadows of Yharnam is one of my favourite fights in the game just because of how alert you have to be of your surroundings. No matter where you are, you have to constantly be on the lookout for the other shadows. The whole fight is just nuts to butts chaos through the entire battle. I'm reviewing the footage right now and you can just see how jittery the camera is because of how much you have to focus on. Martyr Ligarius is absolutely my favourite humanoid boss in the game and just might be my favourite in the base game. Firstly, I've already talked about it, but Castle Cainhurst is an absolutely incredible area with some amazing enemies, and Martyr Ligarius is the perfect way to end it. He wields a scythe and his magic attacks hit like a truck. He uses more magic in the early fight but becomes a lot more aggressive as the fight goes on. He's weak to parrying, but his fast and hard to navigate movements make it incredibly hard to nail down the timing. The beast bosses in this game are by far and away my favourites. Starting with the Bloodstarved Beast, this guy can be incredibly difficult for newcomers. I know this because I had to fight this fella at least 10 times before beating him. This is probably one of the first bosses in the game that could come as sort of a culture shock for Dark Souls fans when playing this for the first time. Nothing in the Souls games are as quick and agile as the Bloodstarved Beast. It's incredibly hard to get off shots on this guy just because of how sporadic it can be. Vicar Amelia is one of my favourite bosses in the game just because of how hard and fast she hits. One minute you could be dominating and the next you're hit with some incredibly hard attacks for an early game boss. Not only this, but it has one of the most unique intro cutscenes of any boss in the game. And the only boss who rivals the Legarius in my opinion is Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos. Even with the hitbox problems, the presentation and difficulty of this boss far outweighs the negatives. This freaky looking beast is one of the most exhilarating fights in the whole game, DLC and all. Not only this, but its attack range is huge, especially in the second phase. You best have some sedatives on you because Frenzy builds up quick as shit. Also, the Court Beyond she does is probably the most dangerous boss attack in the game. And when they both hit you at the same time, you best get ready to read you died on the screen. One thing that I don't see a lot of people talk about when it comes to most games is the boss arena itself. And Bloodborne's has some of the most stunning in any game I've ever played. Rom's Moonside Lake fight is one of the most beautiful arenas in the game. Its design is so simple, yet that's what makes it incredibly unique. Another beautiful arena is the potential final boss fight with Gehrman in the Hunter's Dream. This beautiful flower-filled arena mixed with the prominent moon in the background makes for one of the most cinematic fights in the game. Bloodborne's bosses perfectly exemplify the previous game's precedent of overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds and the payoff being immense. Almost every boss in this game leaves you with adrenaline pumping through your body. Listen, you simply can't make a Bloodborne video without talking about one of, if not the greatest DLC packages of all time. For a DLC, there's a huge amount of content, bosses, and lore. You start out in the Hunter's Nightmare, which is a dilapidated version of the Cathedral Ward. This place is filled to the brim with tough enemies. Huntsmen are replaced with older hunters, and executioners are replaced with executioners on crack. I mean, this guy is the stuff of nightmares, literally. And as you travel further, there are like 10 blood-sucking beasts. This is a place I normally choose to run past, but if you go further along, you'll find the first DLC boss, and it is a doozy. Ludwig the Accursed is probably my favourite boss in the entire game. You're introduced to him through the pain of a corpse, calling Ludwig an unsightly beast and begging for mercy. All the while you see little bits and pieces of Ludwig, the eye-filled mouth and the horse-like face with limbs everywhere. And it makes for one of the most blood-curdling bosses I've ever come up against. Then, when you're thrusted into the fight, this monster barrels towards you and you're left in shock. Not only from the boss, but the disturbing arena you fight in. It's in this huge hall filled with blood and lined with corpses on the edges. The boss hits pretty hard on normal attacks, but look out for the charge attack because it hits like a truck and can almost kill you in one hit. There's not much else I can say about the first phase, but the second has one of the most compelling and beautiful cutscenes in gaming history.
You were at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
From the dialogue to the beautiful glow of the Holy Blade, it may honestly be my favourite moment in the whole game. When the cutscene is over, you're faced with this monster standing up with the Holy Blade. This fight then becomes an absolute feast for the eyes. Seeing this monster wield this blade is horrifying, but it feels strangely right. He has a wide variety of high damage and speedy attacks with the Holy Blade, including an AoE and slam attack that do a shit ton of damage. This boss can be incredibly hard for newcomers, so what I recommend is to dodge into him and smack his ass until he falls. Ludwig is an absolutely stunning boss to start off the DLC. After going further, you'll fight 2 hunters and reach the next area, the research hall. But before that, we'll pick up Lawrence's skull and fight Lawrence, the first vicar. You've heard his name throughout the whole game, but this is the first time you actually see Lawrence. The lore behind this boss is quite compelling, however the fight itself is really underwhelming and at some points really annoying. The first thing you'll notice about this guy is that it's a reskin of the Cleric Beast, and if there's one thing I really dislike about the Souls series are the reskin bosses. Luckily this is the only one, but it doesn't make it any less annoying. It's a cool concept to have to fight a Cleric Beast on fire, but this doesn't do it justice. It's a fine fight in the beginning, but it's when he loses his legs where this fight goes from okay to why does this exist. Around halfway through the fight, Lawrence loses his legs and begins to crawl on the floor, leaving a path of lava as he moves. This stage would be completely fine if the lava didn't stun lock you to all hell and ruin openings to hit Lawrence. And this attack that you can't get out of until you're incredibly low on health is... I can't even explain into words how annoying it was. To be honest, if the lava didn't fuck you in the ass every time you stuck your toe in, this fight will be completely fine, but it does, and I see this as probably the lowest point in the DLC. Now back to the research hall. If you play Dark Souls, then you'll see some similarities to the Duke's Archives, but this area is much better. It's a spiraling maze-like area filled with incredibly powerful and sporadic enemies, not to mention this guy. All of this is accentuated with disturbing dialogue from bloody wrapped patients, all of which I assume are failed experiments.
Oh, Lady Maria, save me, please. I don't hear anything.
You have to find your way up to the roof of the research hall and readjust the staircase to progress through. When the stairs are realigned to fit the large doors, you go through and find an unexpected boss, the Living Failures. These guys to me are just okay. There's nothing especially unique or special about them. The arena is pretty nice and the fact that they respawn adds a nice challenge, but there's really nothing more to say about them. However, it's the next boss that truly wraps this area up nicely. Lady Maria, another old hunter imprisoned inside the Hunter's Nightmare and the one Gurman obsessed over. You're introduced to her as she sits lifeless in a chair, you reach for her and she says,
"A corpse should be left well alone." Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. Liberate you from your wild curiosity.
This fight is so incredible. Lady Maria is super quick and skilled, however because she's a humanoid boss she's very weak to parrying, and can make the first 2 phases pretty easy if you're good at it. It's the 3rd phase that can really kick your ass. As the fight goes on, she stabs herself and becomes a lot more powerful. Her strong and quick attacks make it super difficult to parry and stay alive. Her attacks really are a feast for the eyes. She's very similar to Sister Fried from Dark Souls 3, except she's a lot faster. This fight is incredibly fun, and after you're given the Celestial Dial, a key to the next area, the Fishing Hamlet. As you walk through the bright light, you're welcomed into this rainy, dreary area. Everything about the Fishing Hamlet is so dark and depressing. From the eerie town to the fish-like enemies, this place is absolutely disgusting. As a man who finds fish kinda gross, this place is an absolute nightmare. Don't even get me started on the giant fishmen. Absolute nightmares to fight. The tracking these guys do is absolutely ridiculous and they hit like a fish-filled truck. As you continue, you get more of the same, another small town with more fish people. Further on, you'll find yourself in a cave and you'll find an honestly genius shortcut that nicely pulls the area together. And now for the final DLC boss, Orphan of Kos. I mean, where to start on this fight? Firstly, the boss arena is incredibly beautiful, with the moon in the middle of the sky and the shipwrecks in the background. The arena is huge, and one of the best boss areas in the entire game. The cinematic starts playing, and you see an orphan being born from the Great One Kos. Next to One Reborn, Orphan of Kos has the most disgusting introduction to a boss in this game. With that, this fight is absolutely incredible, and also incredibly hard. He's super sporadic and unpredictable, making the fight all the more difficult to read because he doesn't really have a pattern like other bosses do. His combos are super long and could easily kill you if you get caught in one. He uses his placenta as a weapon, and it can be used long and short range. At 50% health, he reaches his second phase and becomes even more sporadic than he was in the first phase. He becomes a lot more animal-like in his movement, and he's now able to summon lightning. Not only is he extremely quick in his movement, he's also extremely powerful, with one hit being able to put you at half health. A problem with his quickness is that the camera becomes impossibly hard to keep track of when locked on, especially with the jump attacks. Other than that though, Orphan of Kos is probably my favourite final Soulsborne DLC boss ever. It's exciting to play and it becomes a beautiful spectacle. The Old Hunters DLC just might be my favourite DLC I've ever played. I'm still debating in my head over Old Hunters versus Artorias of the Abyss, but both are masterpieces in their own right. Bloodborne through every playthrough is an otherworldly experience. I mean, I just wrote almost 10 pages about this game and just scratched the surface of what this game's about. Playing this game again for this video made me fall back in love with the game, and remember the reason why this is absolutely my favourite game of all time. It's something that's an absolute masterpiece, and I'm thankful that it exists. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Sorry about the long wait for this video. While editing, I had COVID, and then I had holidays, and then I had work. So it's been pretty rough to get this video out, but I'd rather make a good video and take my time on it than a rushed, shitty one. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see ya.